This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. I'm recharged and ready for news delivery and maybe a few corny one-liners. In tonight's show, we'll take a look at what the heck is going on in Portland, Oregon, where protesters have been met with some forceful federal authorities. Plus, we'll take a trip down the pandemic memory lane to see what lessons can be learned from the 2009 swine flu pandemic. Y'all remember that one, right? But first, here's what you need to know off the top. Many states are still seeing an increase in daily numbers of new coronavirus cases, including Texas, Florida, and California. That has many state and local leaders debating another round of shutdowns to get the virus's spread under control.
We have to be as vigilant right now as we were the first day, bring 100% of our strength the way we did the first or second month.
Meanwhile, Congress is trying to figure out how to keep the economy rolling. The Senate went back to work today and has just 15 days to figure out the next stimulus bill. That might mean something smaller scale than the last stimulus package, potentially limiting stimulus checks only to those who earn less than $40,000 per year. Back in May, the House passed the CARES Act, giving single tax filers up to $1,200 and joint households up to $2,400. Scientists across the world are working to develop some sort of vaccine that could help fight against COVID-19. Right now, there are 17 major vaccine candidates being tested on people around the world, and there's one making headlines today. Oxford University's vaccine gave volunteers a strong immune response for nearly 2 months. Roughly 1,000 patients were given the initial vaccine. 10 of them were given a second dose, which seems to have helped even more, though some patients did have minor side effects like fever, chills, and muscle pains. The next phase would include volunteers from Britain, the US, Brazil, and South Africa. You might have noticed more signs that say exact change needed or cards only when out at stores or gas stations. A coin shortage in the US is one of the latest impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. Production of coins at the US Mint has slowed during the pandemic, but experts say it's also a circulation problem. More coins are being stashed away at home as people avoid wanting to touch or spend cash. To try and help local businesses suffering because of the shortage, some banks are creating coin buyback programs. The Federal Reserve also created the U.S. Coin Task Force to help solve the problem. Protests have been ongoing in Portland, Oregon, like many other cities, since the killing of George Floyd in late May. Now there's been increased scrutiny on law enforcement there because of tactics they've used to manage demonstrations, most notably scooping up demonstrators in unmarked vehicles. Newsy's Jamal Andrus has more.
Federal law enforcement officials have once again tear-gassed and used other means of force against protesters in Portland, Oregon. Meanwhile, city and state officials are pushing back.
We have dozens, if not hundreds, of federal troops descending upon our city. And what they're doing is they are sharply escalating the situation. Their presence here is actually leading to more violence and more vandalism.
Oregonians are appalled, and Americans across the country should be as well.
Portland has seen more than 50 days of protests over racial inequality and use of force. But President Trump and his administration have doubled down on their decision to deploy federal officers to Portland, and they plan to take this same type of action in other cities.
New York and Chicago and Philadelphia and Detroit and Baltimore and all of these, Oakland is a mess. We're not going to let this happen in our country. All run by liberal Democrats.
More federal law enforcement to some of these cities?
More federal law enforcement, that I can tell you. In Portland, they've done a fantastic job.
In an interview, Acting Deputy Homeland Security Secretary Ken Cuccinelli echoed the president, defending the officers' presence in the city.
The threat to those federal facilities and officers did materialize in the July 4th weekend and has maintained since that time. And as long as it does, we will maintain our presence. When that violence recedes and those threats recede, that is when we would ratchet back down to what I would call normal presence.
Since federal officers hit the ground in Portland, 3 U.S. House committee chairs and Oregon's U.S. attorney have both requested investigations into the federal presence in the city. Also, the Oregon Attorney General has filed suit requesting a temporary restraining order to stop federal authorities from making arrests in the state.
These federal agencies are operating with no transparency and against the will of just about every leader in our state.
As with many protests across the country, the vast majority of demonstrations have been peaceful. but there have also been several cases of vandalism since the protests began. According to the Chicago Tribune, President Trump will be sending 150 federal officers to Chicago this week. This comes after Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot said she has, quote, great concerns about the president's involvement. Jamal Andrus, Newsy, Chicago.
We're going to let off the gas a bit and let you all take a look at some digital billboards. When you're back, we'll take a detour over to Twitter's trending topics.
We dig a little deeper on the stories of the day to help start making sense of it all.
We're working remotely, but our mission hasn't changed.
Newsy's here for you.
Newsy is here for you.
From our living rooms
and our kitchens.
24/7. Focused on facts and not hype.
Be informed,
not influenced.
Nintendo updates gamers on some new releases, and the UAE sends a probe to Mars. But first, we'll tell you where Americans aren't going anytime soon. Here's what's trending. Cross another name off the list of countries allowing entry for U.S. tourists. The Bahamas is closing its doors to any commercial flights or ships except from Europe or Canada. Tourism is the Bahamas' biggest industry, and the U.S. is its biggest market. But as the virus surges in the States, the Bahamas Prime Minister says allowing American tourists just isn't worth the risk.
For some places, it is unclear when or how they get this virus under control.
Nintendo Direct is trending because the video game company gave gamers a little something to nibble on with new releases Monday.
Hello everyone, welcome to our first Nintendo Direct Mini Partner Showcase.
Some of the biggest announcement revolved around new Nintendo Switch content for The Legend of Zelda spin-off Cadence of Hyrule, and a release date for the popular Shin Megami Tensei 5. But we also got to look at a pro wrestling game that has turned WWE superstars into some goofy looking guys. United Arab Emirates has successfully launched an unmanned probe headed for Mars. This marks the Arab world's first interplanetary space mission. The probe, called Hope, will orbit Mars for 1 Martian year, or 687 Earth days, to gather data about Mars's atmosphere and hopefully shed some light on the planet's history. The US and China both have Mars mission launches scheduled for later this summer. The US has rovers on the planet's surface already. As you might already know, this ain't our first go-round when it comes to dealing with the pandemic. In 2009, it was H1N1 influenza, or the swine flu pandemic. It was called that because the virus jumped from pigs to humans. Federal officials promised millions of doses of the vaccine by the fall of that year, but that didn't happen because of unforeseen challenges. As Newsy's Patrick Terpstra explained, some of the same companies that worked to deploy vaccines back then are now working to deliver COVID-19 vaccines as soon as possible.
Okay, blow him out. He was your typical 5-year-old. He liked Star Wars and Transformers.
Joseph Murata was hospitalized with H1N1 flu during the 2009 outbreak.
I was standing at his bedside, looking in his eyes. We were talking about Halloween costumes, and he coded. And I remember just holding up my hand like that, and I said, "Did he die? Did he die? Did he die?"
Joseph had died. It was just 2 weeks before the vaccine for H1N1 was available in his Ohio hometown, after a summer of unexpected delays and shortages in global vaccine production. Now, as the world desperately awaits immunity to the coronavirus, the pandemic a decade ago proves vaccine expectations can sometimes be overly optimistic. We found 4 of the companies now working on a COVID vaccine were part of the troubled rollout of the H1N1 vaccine in 2009. Tom Frieden led the CDC at the time.
I think the major lesson was not to trust the manufacturers. The manufacturers said they would have vaccine months before they actually did. Now, it wasn't their fault.
He says the snags were unforeseeable. In summer 2009, federal officials predicted there would be at least 120 million doses of vaccine for H1N1 swine flu by October.
120 million doses by mid-October. I say that's the goal.
Instead, just 17 million doses were shipped out that month, so little that much of it had to be reserved for healthcare workers. Vaccine makers and the government had overpromised and underdelivered.
There is a shortage.
H1N1 had proven to be surprisingly difficult to grow in the lab. There were glitches with new machinery on production lines, and researchers' understanding of the novel flu strain evolved, costing time as they tweaked their work. Sanofi Pasteur, one of the largest suppliers of swine flu vaccine, was called to Congress to explain the delays.
However, there were some factors that impacted even our considerable abilities and extensive preparation.
Now Sanofi is among dozens of companies working on COVID immunization. The French company told us it aims to have a vaccine approved in the first half of 2021. A spokesman told us, "We have a large group of people trying to anticipate all bottlenecks."
It's key that we not overpromise. We are very hopeful there'll be a vaccine, but we have no proof that it will work, be safe, be available, and when.
Say thank you, Uncle Chad.
Thank you, Uncle Chad.
Cerise Murata says she does not blame anyone for the H1N1 vaccine coming too late for her son Joseph.
It's sad. I mean, I don't tend to look in the rearview mirror a whole lot because I know I can't change the past.
She's now Chief Operating Officer at Families Fighting Flu, a nonprofit promoting flu awareness and annual flu vaccinations with some donor support from the pharmaceutical industry.
What we really need to do as a country is learn from what happened in the past.
At least 86 children died in 2009 from H1N1 before immunizations were widely available.
You stop and think, oh my gosh, he would be 16 right now. He should be learning how to drive a car. He should be going to prom. There you go. He's forever 5 in my mind and in my heart.
Patrick Terpstra, Newsy, Washington.
This is still in style. You should try it.
As the coronavirus has quickly spread across the world,
A freeze on travel has the potential to reshape why people fly.
This halt in traditional entertainment highlights how viewers and creators are coping together.
healthcare systems in the U.S. will need 3.5 billion masks.
The economic damage looks very different on either side of the Atlantic.
There are only about 117,000 beds nationwide.
When can we get back to normal?
President Trump has made it clear that he believes the SCOTUS decision on DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, expanded his executive powers.
The decision by the Supreme Court on DACA allows me to do things on immigration, on health care, on other things that we've never done before. And you're going to find it to be a very exciting 2 weeks.
A federal judge confirmed that the government must restore the DACA program in full, but as Newsy's Ben Shamiso reports, the administration looks like they're defying the Supreme Court by refusing to process first-time applicants.
So the decision just came out and we won!
The Trump administration is reportedly entering some questionable legal ground just a few weeks after the Supreme Court blocked the White House's attempt to strike down DACA. That's the program that shields from deportation roughly 650,000 undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. at a young age.
I don't think the Supreme Court could have been more clear.
Ur Jadoo was the top lawyer at the agency that oversees legal immigration during most of President Obama's second term. She says the Trump administration is clearly violating the Constitution.
You have to return to the moment where DACA was not rescinded, and that means initial applications and renewal applications both must be processed.
Virtually every analyst says the government must now offer the deportation protection to anyone who qualifies under the original terms of the Obama-era program. But the administration appears to be defying the Supreme Court's order, now a mandate, by rejecting new DACA applications and only processing renewals.
I find that appalling that any government would do that and defy one of the branches of government in our Constitution.
On Friday, a federal judge confirmed that the government needs to restore the DACA program in full. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which administers the program, tells Newsy it has rejected some first-time DACA requests in the past couple weeks because of errors in their applications. Newsy was unable to verify the validity of that claim, and the agency did not clarify if they are now officially accepting new applicants. Besides potentially defying the country's highest court, the administration is also denying immigration benefits to around 300,000 people who don't have DACA protections yet but are eligible. That includes Andrea Anaya.
I felt like just really down because I didn't have protection. I couldn't get a license. I couldn't, work. I couldn't do anything.
Anaya moved to the U.S. from El Salvador with her mother when she was 5. She turned 15, the minimum age to qualify for DACA, right when President Donald Trump rescinded the program in 2017, and she missed out on the protection as a result.
And I grew up with a lot of anxiety and depression on, was today my last day? Is today the day that, I will encounter an ICE agent? Is today the day that my family is going to be ripped away from their home?
President Trump recently announced he would soon be taking care of DACA and give recipients a road to citizenship. But only Congress has the power to legalize dreamers, and bipartisan efforts to do so have failed multiple times in the past, sometimes due to the president himself walking away from negotiations. Ben Chamisso, Newsy, Chicago.
If you haven't already, now's a good time to tweet at us using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. You can probably get some wholesome interaction out of me during business hours, but be ready for my musings on which non-human cartoon characters are actually black once the sun goes down. Remote learning might not be anyone's favorite way to give or receive instruction. It can present some difficulties for educators and students, but for K-12 students with disabilities, the coronavirus has made things even more difficult. Newsy's Amy Morona explains.
There's already a reported achievement gap for K-12 students with disabilities, and the coronavirus pandemic may be widening it.
For some, in particular younger students learning English, students with learning differences and disabilities, and those who were struggling before school facilities were closed, there may be a lifelong impact if they're not back in school sometime soon.
Under federal law, K-12 students with disabilities who qualify are required to receive a public education and related services equal to their peers for free. 7 million young people receive special instruction in public schools nationwide. Some parents acknowledge remote learning has been tough.
With a kid with an IEP, it just adds more to the picture. Am I giving him the special education that he needs? Am I giving him the speech therapy that he needs? Or am I working well enough with the school, and will he do well enough at home receiving that? So there's a lot to think about.
Officials in places like Los Angeles reported that only about half of their students with disabilities participated in remote learning each week this spring. And a recent national survey of roughly 3,500 schools found that districts appeared to have done less for disabled students compared to their general education peers this spring.
The spring was challenging.
Martin Odima is a special education teacher in Minnesota. He says while his district has been embracing iPads and other technology for years, remote learning still presented some hurdles.
The challenge was for teachers being able to transfer a lot of the things they're doing in person online. For families, a lot of the pressure was put on families to be able to support their kids at home. These students have been at school, and the cognitive load is shared amongst 7 or 8 different staff members. But then when they're at home, all of that is put on the parent.
And now, as many states see spikes in coronavirus cases and leaders weigh reopening plans, families must decide if they should send their students back to school this fall. For many, it's a tough choice.
Many of our children with special needs are medically complex. They have underlying medical problems and challenges. And so you don't want to, it's just a lot of burden on your shoulders. Am I making the right decision? Am I making a decision that's going to kill them?
A report out this week from a national group of scientists encourages younger kids and students with disabilities to return to school buildings with precautions in the fall. They say these students would benefit from getting in-person services that don't translate as well to a digital screen, like occupational or physical therapy. Some experts say more classroom time may be a good idea, but admit that returning is a complicated decision for everyone involved.
For a lot of kids who require services and support to be successful in school, routine can be really important. And lack of routine can really disrupt their instruction. And I don't envy the school administrators who are trying to make the right call.
Amy Morona, Newsy, Washington.
We don't usually go for feel-good stories here. Not because we're opposed to them, it's just that they are few and far between. But we thought it'd be nice to include this one about a 100-year-old British man being knighted for doing a good deed. Newsy's Shira Tarlow has more.
The British veteran who raised over $40 million for the UK's National Health Service was knighted by Queen Elizabeth. Captain Tom Moore raised the money by walking the length of his garden 100 times during the coronavirus lockdown. His original goal, $1,200 by his 100th birthday. As Moore's campaign went viral, donations flowed in from around the world.
This sum of money got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was absolutely, I was overwhelmed by the very fact that that sum of money coming by me doing a little walk up down this path.
Friday's ceremony was the Queen's first public appearance in months. The royal has been self-isolating at Windsor Castle since March due to the pandemic. Ahead of the event, Moore said he was overwhelmed by the chance to meet the Queen.
Isn't everybody gets the chance to see the Queen, is it? I think that's going to be absolutely marvellous for me.
He also joked about having to kneel.
I don't, if I kneel down, I'll never get up again.
Moore has inspired people of all ages to raise funds by walking, including a 9-year-old with cerebral palsy and autism. UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has also thanked Moore.
Let's take the selflessness and the love of the health and the care workers and the charities, the public spirit and the good humour of the entire population, and let's brew them together with the superhuman energy of Captain Tom, bounding around his garden at the age of 100 and raising millions for charity.
By the power vested in me, I now release you from this program. We'll be back with more In the Loop tomorrow, same time, same place, but don't go anywhere just yet. More top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.